Today on the Matt Walsh Show, China has increased its crackdown on Christians in the country, but it's not just communist China that has made Christianity effectively illegal. The same thing is happening in Western democracies across the globe. One of those democracies has just passed a law effectively making Christian prayer illegal. We'll talk about that. Also, the stock market bounces back as Trump pauses most of the tariffs. Chris Matthews returns to MSNBC and makes one of the dumbest comments in the history of cable news, which is saying something. And the internet has been very mad at me this week, even more than usual. We'll take a look at some of the outraged comments and videos and respond to all of that and more today on the Matt Walsh Show. Have you ever come across someone saying that capitalism is evil or something similar, maybe in a video, online, on TV, or just talking with someone? What was your reaction if you did? When did capitalism become such a hot-button issue anyway? Well, it seems like people have such strong opinions about it and very little understanding of capitalism as a whole. Luckily, if you're looking to expand your knowledge and horizons on a broad range of topics, including subjects like capitalism, Hillsdale College is offering more than 40 free online courses. That's right, completely free. You can learn about the United States Constitution, explore stories from the Book of Genesis, discover the rise and fall of the Roman Republic, or even study the history of the ancient Christian church. I do recommend watching their new course, Understanding Capitalism. In just 7 lectures, you'll learn about the role of profit and loss, how human nature shapes our economy, and why capitalism depends on private property rights, the rule of law, and freedom. You'll also discover why capitalism actually encourages morality rather than undermining it, like today's varying political agendas would have you believe. Understanding economics and capitalism empowers individuals and societies to make informed decisions, evaluate policy impacts, anticipate market changes, and ultimately create more prosperous communities. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/Walsh to enroll in this course, Understanding Capitalism. There's no cost. It's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/Walsh to enroll for free, hillsdale.edu/Walsh. Amid all the talk about tariffs with China and how they steal America's intellectual property and establish all kinds of trade barriers with this country, you might have missed this story. It's not about economics, but at the same time, it tells you a lot about what authoritarian countries like China fear the most. So beginning on May 1st, China will accelerate its crackdown on religion and Christianity in particular. Foreign missionaries will be banned from preaching unless they obtain formal approval from the government. And according to Chinese state media, the goal of the new regulation is to protect national security and political stability, quote unquote, by forcing people to attend official state-run religious services with pre-approved messaging. Additionally, Chinese state media has recently boasted about the fact that religious groups, which the government calls cult organizations, have been increasingly shut down in China. At this point, one of the fastest ways to disappear in China is to deliver a sermon that upsets the ruling party. Of course, this is the exact opposite of the result we were promised when the United States normalized free trade with China several decades ago. As Bill Clinton put it at the time, membership in the WTO will not create a free society in China overnight or guarantee that China will play by global rules, but over time, I believe it will move China faster and further in the right direction. Well, that has not happened. Instead, China is now aggressively moving to crush Christians for the simple reason that Christians believe in a higher power than their government. And we have not introduced Western norms to China. We have not exported our values to them. Instead, despite the promises of free trade, China has successfully exported its totalitarian impulses and its anti-Christian impulses to the West. One by one, Western countries are adopting anti-Christian crackdowns to the point that they're making it illegal for Christians to practice their faith. What's happening right now in New South Wales, which is a state on the east coast of Australia, makes this very clear. Earlier this month, something called the Conversion Practices Ban Act of 2024 became law in New South Wales. This law, by its own terms, allows the authorities to arrest Christians for praying. Now, that is not an exaggeration. That's not an overstatement. It's actually written into the legislation. Quoting from the government of New South Wales, quote, praying with or over a person with the intent to change or suppress their sexuality or gender identity is unlawful. It is unlawful even if that person has asked you to pray for them to be able to change or suppress their sexuality or gender identity, close quote. This again is in Australia, a Western nation, not China. Praying with someone who wants you to pray with them could land you in jail. That's happening right now in a supposed Western democracy. In other words, if someone who wants to pray to God, if somebody wants to pray to God to overcome his gender dysphoria, a condition that by definition causes significant mental distress, then his pastor cannot pray with him. In fact, his own family members cannot pray with him. If the police discover that any unapproved prayers have been occurring, they can kick down the doors of the church or the family home and haul away the violators. And then they'll spend up to 5 years in prison for their crime against the state, which is the crime of praying. Just to emphasize this point, the government of New South Wales published the single most Orwellian video you'll ever see. And no matter how many times you've heard the word Orwellian, believe me, this qualifies. This is the government's attempt to intimidate the millions of people who live in New South Wales with their new law that bans prayer. And here's how this video begins. Watch this.
South Wales, all people, regardless of sexual orientation or gender identity, should feel welcome and valued and be able to live authentically and with pride. There are those who believe that being LGBTQA is an illness, a choice, a disorder, or a disease. They believe it can be changed or hidden. They believe that things can be done to stop a person being LGBTQA or to fix them. These actions might look like counselling, never-ending referrals, prayer, or pastoral conversation that is intended to change or suppress someone's gender or sexuality. Some people who believe these things also believe that a person who has a different sexual orientation or gender identity can't also be a person of faith. But we know these so-called conversion practices are deeply harmful. They don't work, and they are damaging to the whole community.
By the way, of course, we have the closed captions and the sign language interpreter at the same. I don't know why you need both. If you're deaf, I think that the closed captions are probably good enough. But anyway, first of all, by the terms of this legislation, every single gender activist, every trans activist in Australia is a criminal because they all believe, without exception, that you can choose to be LGBTQA, which is apparently now the acronym. There's no other way to explain people who ping pong between genders at will or people who detransition. In fact, the concept of fluidity is now dogma in the LGBT religion. Fluidity, sexual fluidity, gender fluidity means that you can change from one sexuality or gender to another. So if somebody identifies as a bi-gender toasterkin and then a few weeks later decides that he's really a demigender, half-humanoid alpaca or whatever, then at some point we can conclude this person has made a choice to identify one way and then the other. And every step of the way, gender activists, according to the tenets of their ideology, have no choice but to affirm everything. This is one of the reasons trans activists keep losing in court, by the way. They have to admit that, under their logic, so-called trans people can choose at any time to be trans or not trans. And therefore, because trans status is malleable, again, malleable by definition, by their definition, they're not entitled to civil rights protections, which only apply to immutable, unchanging traits. Now, as the video continues, things become even more dystopian. There's this line, for example, quote, "All people should feel welcome and valued and be able to live authentically and with pride." Yes, all people, every single one of them, should feel valued and welcomed. They should all be able to live authentically. But this promise apparently does not apply to Christians who believe, as all of humanity did until 15 minutes ago, that men are men and women are women. Those Christians do not have the right to live authentically or feel welcomed. Instead, they can go straight to prison. So here's more of the video because, again, as it goes along, things get worse.
New South Wales now has a law against conversion practices. These practices, whether done by family members, health professionals or healthcare providers, disability support providers, teachers or faith leaders, among others, are now unlawful because they are based on ideas that we now know are untrue and harmful. The law says a practice is illegal if it's directed at an individual because of their sexual orientation or gender identity, to try to make them change or suppress their sexual orientation or gender identity. It is not a conversion practice to state what a religion says about a particular topic, provided it's not directed to changing or suppressing an individual's sexual orientation or gender identity. There's nothing wrong or broken about LGBTQA people. It's damaging to say that LGBTQA people should be fixed, and it's inaccurate to say they can be fixed or healed.
So it's been established in the law, directly in writing. In this video, they say specifically that these quote-unquote conversion practices include prayer. That's explicitly outlined, that prayer is a conversion practice. And then they casually establish that family members, including a mother and father, can be incarcerated if they don't affirm their child's imagined gender identity. In fact, if a mother or father were to simply pray that their child would overcome their gender dysphoria, they can go to jail. If the government somehow catches wind that you were praying for your child to not be confused anymore, you can go to jail for that. And of course, they establish all this with this sing-songy HR lady reading the voiceover. Scratch an HR lady and you'll find a power-mad despot every single time. We've talked about so-called conversion therapy before and how efforts to ban the practice are both unconstitutional and incoherent. In this country, the Supreme Court is about to hear a case concerning whether Colorado's ban on conversion therapy violates the First Amendment. The problem is that bans on conversion therapy in every case are premised on the idea that sexual orientation cannot be changed. But in the same breath, the government in New South Wales will tell you that sex is extremely changeable. And in fact, you can go to the doctor and change it tomorrow. You can change it without going to a doctor at all. You can just wake up tomorrow and say, I'm now a man or I'm now a woman, and that's what you are. So if you're changing your sex, then you're also changing your sexual orientation, as I've outlined before, under their logic. A man who supposedly becomes a woman but retains his attraction to men, let's say, so would become a lesbian in their view. Or rather retains a straight man who's attracted to women and then becomes a woman and is still attracted to women, has gone from straight to lesbian in their view. This is the logical problem with these conversion therapy bans that they simply have no answer for. It's like dividing by zero. But now they're using this phony logic to justify throwing parents and priests in prison for the crime of prayer. Watch.
Reports about conversion practices can be made to Anti-Discrimination New South Wales. Formal complaints may lead to conciliation between the people involved, targeted education, or further investigation. In New South Wales, it is a crime to provide a conversion practice that causes substantial mental or physical harm or endangers an individual's life. This can lead to up to 5 years in prison. It is also a crime to take someone outside of New South Wales for these practices, or to engage someone from outside of New South Wales to deliver these practices to someone in New South Wales. This can lead to up to 3 years in prison, a fine, or both.
So I guess if you live in New South Wales and let's say you enlist someone else who doesn't live there to pray. If you live in New South Wales and you call your grandma who lives in another state or another country, and you say, "Hey, can you pray for my child, your grandson, who's struggling with gender dysphoria?" You go to jail for that. I mean, again, this is not me like exaggerating, or this is not a slippery slope. That's what the law says. That's directly, explicitly what the law says. The scope of this law is so broad that you could probably claim that I'm violating it right now if my show was broadcast in New South Wales. If you're listening to this show in New South Wales, is that a crime? Could you go to jail for that? Maybe. They want Australians to snitch on each other if they get a whiff of anyone who dares to suggest that gender ideology isn't real. And in a lot of ways, it's like the COVID lockdowns all over again. You might remember that at the height of the pandemic, there was a nationwide manhunt in Australia when some guy sneezed in an empty elevator without a mask on. And now they're going to have manhunts over unauthorized prayers. And if you don't believe that, consider what just happened a few weeks ago to Billboard Chris. He was peacefully standing in a market in Brisbane wearing a sign that expresses his opposition to the castration of children in the name of gender ideology. He only spoke to people who spoke to him first. He didn't obstruct anyone's movement or anything like that. People were walking around him the whole time. He did not obviously assault anyone or accost anyone in any way. There's no dispute any of that. It's all on video. Nevertheless, Brisbane police showed up and arrested him on camera. Watch.
So as you've been directed, I'm acting Sergeant Josh Young from Brisbane City Police Station, so you've been directed that you need to leave, stop doing what you're doing because you're currently obstructing the mall area, which has its laws that do not permit this activity. Okay, so we would now require you to leave the area. Okay? Are you gonna leave the area?
So I've read the law, and I'm being told that I was obstructing people from their movement, which is not true. And I'm not disturbing anyone. I stand quietly, having conversations with people who approach me. And so I don't believe I'm in violation of that.
You are obstructing people, okay? So at this
How am I obstructing people?
It's been explained to you, okay?
Oh,
So
that was a lie, but
do you want to grab your things and leave?
no, I'm not leaving. So I'm a man of integrity and truth, and it is not true that I was obstructing anyone. And I don't think I can, in good conscience, yield to this act of authoritarianism when it's based on lies, and I'm not comfortable moving.
Are you not going to comply with that?
No.
No? Okay, all right.
So-
We're going to head that way then. I'm going to use reasonable force, whether I need to put hands on you or not. We're going
All
to
right.
walk down that way.
Can I carry my phone with me?
That'd be great. Carry your own phone? Great. If
All
I
right.
don't have to touch your things, then that works.
I'm being arrested.
So they arrested him for standing in a public place with a sign. There's no doubt that if the sign had been, pro-gay marriage or whatever, then none of this would have happened. If you watch the full video, the police can't name a single other instance where they've jailed someone for peacefully protesting at that location. But Billboard Chris blasphemed Australia's state religion, so they took him away in handcuffs. And now they're planning to do the same thing to clergy. The other day, an Australian commentator named Evelyn Ray outlined exactly what's happening here. And here was her assessment, which is worth playing, not only because she's right, but also because it's good to know that, Australia hasn't been completely captured yet. Here it is.
Look, just further to what Kel said, I don't think it's going to be too hard of a stretch to prosecute something like this because it's completely pending on subjectiveness, which should never be in a court of law. It's testing whether harm, and when it comes to, seriousness of somebody's life, all somebody has to say is, I wanted to kill myself because somebody said, and prayed over me that I wouldn't be same-sex attracted. Boom, there you go. You've met your criteria based on the burden of proof, which they've put in this legislation. I mean, what is this? Are we China? This is regulated religion. In China, they haven't fully outlawed Christianity, but what they have done is regulate it, and that is exactly what this is. This is straight out of China.
So everything Evelyn Ray just said also applies to many other countries. This is not a problem that's limited to Australia. Here's a report from Reason late last year, for example. This is the kind of story that J.D. Vance mentioned in his recent address to European leaders. Quote, a British man was convicted of criminal charges for praying silently near an abortion clinic. The man, Adam Smith Connor, did not attempt to harass, intimidate, or interact in any way with those entering the clinic. Instead, he wordlessly prayed with his head bowed slightly. He was not even on clinic property. He was outside the sightline of the clinic itself. As a result, Smith Connor was questioned by police and later charged with violating a public spaces protection order, a broad censorship order enabled by the 2014 Antisocial Behavior Crime and Policing Act. Under this law, local authorities can obtain special status for some public places, allowing them to ban a huge range of conduct in the name of limiting antisocial behavior, close quote. So again, this is someone who was not on clinic property, was not even talking to anyone, was praying not even out loud, but in his head, and was arrested. Because prayer is considered antisocial behavior in England. It's like exactly what you would hear in communist China. It's exactly the same argument, if you could call it that they make for arresting people, Christians who pray in communist China. These kinds of arrests are happening because from Britain to Colorado to Canada to Australia to China, authoritarians in government detest any challenge to their authority. These government officials know that they are not impressive people. Australia's prime minister has barely held a real job in his life. Most of the country is represented by people like that. They're petrified that their subjects might worship someone other than themselves. And as a result, they're now throwing Christians in prison for practicing their faith. This trend has accelerated in China, and it's now spreading throughout the West. Christians are being forcibly silenced at scale. They're being vilified and incarcerated for what they believe. Now, I began by saying this is a monologue that is not about economics or trade wars, and that's true. But as we consider how we'll work with these countries in the future, as we negotiate trade deals and so on, the assaults on Christians simply cannot be ignored. These attacks are as unlawful and immoral as they are systematic. They're becoming a fundamental part of the culture of both our allies and our adversaries. For the benefit of billions of Christians and to preserve basic constitutional rights like the freedom of speech, this coordinated assault on religion must end. Now let's get to our 5 headlines. You and your family's dreams matter, and so does protecting them. Secure your family's future with Policy Genius Life Insurance. They make finding coverage simple, giving your loved ones a financial safety net to handle debt, expense, or even build wealth over time. With Policy Genius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. Some options are 100% online and let you avoid unnecessary medical exams. Their side-by-side comparison tool shows you quotes from top insurers across America completely free with no hidden fees. Their licensed experts are with you every step of the way, answering questions, handling paperwork, and advocating for you so you can get the coverage you need and get back to living your life. 40% of people wish they'd gotten life insurance earlier. Get ahead today and give you and your loved ones peace of mind, knowing they'll be financially protected if something happens to you, covering their everyday expenses, mortgage payments, or even college tuition if you're no longer there to provide. Don't just take my word for it. Thousands of satisfied customers have left 5-star reviews on Google and Trustpilot. No matter what stage of life you're in, Policy Genius helps you find the perfect coverage for your specific situation. Secure your family's tomorrow so you have peace of mind today. Head to policygenius.com/Walsh or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/Walsh. Daily Wire reports the American stock market quickly rebounded on Wednesday afternoon after President Donald Trump announced that he was pausing his reciprocal Liberation Day tariffs on all countries except China. Responding to Trump's announcement, the Dow Jones, S&P 500, and NASDAQ had all climbed above their Tuesday close by early Wednesday afternoon. Before the surge, Trump said on Truth Social that he was raising tariffs on China to 125% and lowering tariffs across the rest of the board to 10%, pausing the steeper reciprocal hikes. So that's where all this lands. I mean, and you may have noticed that over the past week or two, while everybody has been freaking out about the tariffs, that I've barely mentioned it on this show. And that's partly because economic news isn't really my bag. I don't think I have the most valuable insight to offer on the subject, frankly. You know, I think I have a pretty clear idea of where I have valuable insights and where I don't. And so it's not my focus, even though it is obviously important. But it's also because I wanted to see how all this plays out. I didn't want to be a panikin, to use Trump's phrase, which I do, to use his term, which I quite like. Just see how it plays out for a few days. Like, you can do that. It's okay to do that. When something is happening, you can wait. You can just see, like, let's see what happens here for a couple of weeks at least. And then you can make your pronouncements. It's like, it doesn't have to be right away. But of course, these days you're expected to have a definitive pronouncement on everything immediately, especially in my line of work. Everyone expects you to diagnose every situation in 5.2 seconds and then sort of stake your ground and defend your position. But a couple of weeks ago, well, I wasn't sure how it would play out. I just wasn't sure. I didn't know. My crystal ball was broken. So I said, well, let's see how it plays out. And so now we kind of have an idea of it. And very often it will turn out that if you just wait, there will be more clarity. I will say that I have never regretted waiting to chime in on something. I have regretted not waiting in a few cases that come to mind. So all that said, I think Trump landed in the right place here. Focusing on China makes sense. China is the one ripping us off to an extraordinary degree. Getting into a trade war with China is one thing. Getting into a trade war with the whole world is another thing. The question is whether Trump had always planned to play it this way, or was this pause purely a reaction to the markets? And I don't know what was in his head. I do know that I like that we're focusing on China. In fact, maybe you've seen this clip, which I think is excellent, of Kevin O'Leary, Mr. Wonderful from Shark Tank, saying that, if anything, in his mind, Trump, even now with 125%, is going too easy on China. He would like to see the tariffs at 400%. Let's watch that.
But Kevin, he said there's a lot of deals that they're literally kissing his ass, was the phrase he used, very eloquently. Where are the deals?
104% tariffs on China are not enough. I'm advocating 400%. I do business in China. They don't play by the rules. They've been in the WTO for decades. They have never abided by any of the rules they agreed to when they came in for decades. They cheat, they steal IP. I can't litigate in their courts. They take product, technology, they steal it, they manufacture it, and sell it back here. Never has an administration.
400% tariffs? What would that look
like? I want Xi on an airplane to Washington to level the playing field. It's just not about tariffs anymore. Nobody has taken on China yet, not the Europeans, no administration for decades. As someone who actually does business there, I've had enough. I speak for millions of Americans who have IP that have been stolen by the Chinese. I have nothing against the Chinese people. They brought great literacy, art, and tech to the world. The government cheats and steals, and finally, an administration, you may not like Trump, you may not like his style or his rhetoric, finally, an administration that puts up and says enough. 400% tariffs tomorrow morning. He'll tell you why. Xi can only stay the supreme leader if people are employed. If we wipe out any business there, because we are still 39% of all consumables on Earth and 25% of the world's GDP, America is the #1 economy on Earth with all the cards. We will not have that forever. It's time to squeeze Chinese heads into the wall now.
Well said. You can't argue with anything that he said there. China's ripping us off. They don't play by the rules. They steal IP. No question about any of that. It's just a question of having the will to do something about it, being willing to absorb the short-term cost. And that's something that very few American leaders in modern history have ever been willing to do. And it's a message that they've been unwilling to deliver to the American people. And that's what I've respected about Trump's messaging through all of this. However you feel about the tariffs, when he said, it's going to hurt at first, it's going to be painful, you never hear political leaders in this country say that. It's almost shocking to hear, because you never hear them ever say that. You never hear political leaders say, hey, I'm advocating a policy, I'm pushing a policy, I'm enacting a policy that will hurt right now, but it'll be worth it in the long run. And that's exactly the problem, by the way. That's why nothing ever gets solved. Because to solve any problem, any significant problem, there is going to be pain. There is going to be volatility. No significant problem in this country can be solved without that. And so if we're never willing to endure it, and if no political leader is willing to take the hit in the polls, then nothing will get solved. And this is why nothing does get solved. Any example, point to anything economically, culturally, point to any major problem we face that's been allowed to fester. And the reason is always going to be that our political leaders just were not willing to do the things that were necessary to fix it, because they knew that in the short term, it would be painful for people. And then they would take a hit in the polls, and they weren't willing to take the hit. This is why, Social Security, for example, is such a boondoggle, because nobody has been willing to stand up and say, listen, we need to get out of this thing. It doesn't make sense. It's not going to work. We cannot keep taking tens of thousands of dollars from working Americans every single year, to put into a retirement account, that doesn't even exist, forcing them to, enroll in our retirement savings program. We can't keep doing it. So we got to get out of this thing. It's going to hurt. There's going to be pain, but it can't go on. And in the long run, it's the right thing. Nobody is willing to say that about anything. And so with this, with trade, with tariffs, it's like the first time that I can think of in my lifetime when we've heard this kind of messaging from a president or really any political leader. Okay, Representative Brandon Gill questioned a witness during a House Judiciary Committee hearing about sanctuary cities yesterday. And I don't know a lot about Brandon Gill. Actually, I don't know anything about him, but I have seen a few clips like this recently where he's been questioning somebody in a hearing. And I've been pretty impressed in those clips, including in this one. Watch how this plays out.
Would you describe Baltimore as a safe city?
What's your definition of safe?
I'm asking you, is Baltimore a safe city? Is it the kind of city that you would want to raise a family and maybe go jogging in without having to be worried about being murdered or raped?
I grew up in Baltimore. My family is in Baltimore. My mother still lives in the same house in West Baltimore.
Is it a safe city?
60 plus years, so the answer is definitely yes.
You think Baltimore is a safe city?
Of course it is.
Okay, do you know what the homicide rate is in Baltimore?
Exactly, no.
It's about 35 per 100,000. Do you know what the homicide rate is in the rest of the United States?
No, I don't.
I can tell you that the homicide rate in Baltimore is about 5 times the national average. Do you know how Baltimore's robbery rate compares to the rest of the United States?
At the moment, no, I don't.
You don't? It's about 8.4 times the national average. Do you know how Baltimore's assault rate compares to the national average?
No, I don't.
It's about 3.4 times higher. Does that sound like a safe city to you?
Safe to me and my family members.
So that's safe to you? 5 times higher than the national average for homicides? That's a safe city?
Perception.
It's what? Excuse me?
I said it's what for instance, it's perception. It's what you feel as a resident in Baltimore City.
If you're murdered, I don't think it matters what you feel, do you? Is it your testimony that the safety
Baltimore City
depends on how people feel?
To me, Baltimore City is a safe city.
To you, it's a safe city. I don't think it's safe to the people who are being murdered every single weekend there.
Yeah, it's a safe city. I guess, it's all, safety is all relative. So living in a house in Baltimore is safe compared to, I don't know, being in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre guy's meat locker or something. So great stuff from this representative. And what we see from this witness is a large part of the reason why these cities like Baltimore are so horrifically unsafe. And by the way, I grew up in the Baltimore area. I didn't live in the city, but I grew up in the area. And yes, it's very unsafe. Everyone in the area knows that as you get closer to the city, the neighborhoods get more and more dangerous, which is how it works in every major city. But the thing about Baltimore is that, years ago, when I was a kid, many parts of the city were nice. You could go downtown, you could go to the Inner Harbor, you could walk down some of the historic streets with all the old houses. You could go to Little Italy, you could go to Fort McHenry, you could go to, I used to love going to look at the shot tower in Baltimore where they used to make musket balls. And that was cool because that was a building that was built in like the 1820s. And when it was built, it was the largest building in the entire country. And now, of course, it's dwarfed by every even small-sized skyscraper. But anyway, Baltimore used to be family-friendly as long as you stayed out of the inner city. As long as you stayed out of the places where they filmed The Wire, basically, you were okay. And that all started to change. And by the time I moved away from home, we weren't going to the Inner Harbor anymore. It became too dangerous. The violent crime took over the entire city. And that's a trend that's continued, by the way, with the Inner Harbor violent crime. There was just an article I saw recently about violent crime in the Inner Harbor continuing to rise. And those are, again, I bring that up because those are supposed to be the safe parts. Those are the safe parts of the city that if I still lived in the area, I wouldn't be bringing my kids there. We wouldn't be going to the Inner Harbor. I'm just not going to do that. And that's the way it so often goes. And how does this happen? Well, we just saw. Because you've got these people who refuse to be honest about the problem. They refuse to face it. They refuse to be honest. You've got someone here in a congressional hearing on camera, under oath, testifying that Baltimore is safe. In fact, he says it as if it's self-evident. Of course it's safe. Everyone knows that Baltimore City is safe. It's world-renowned as such a safe, peaceful place. He doesn't really believe that. Nobody believes that. Everyone knows it's bullcrap. But there's no chance of any of the problems being fixed because they refuse to be even remotely honest about it, which is the point that we'll return to, in fact, in the daily cancellation. We'll get back to that. So moving on to this, Chris Matthews appeared on MSNBC yesterday. He used to have a show on MSNBC, as older folks may recall. You kids may not remember that, but, well, you kids don't even know that MSNBC exists, but it does. It's a cable news channel. And this guy was on the network for a long time, and then he farted on air, and he was fired. I may be slightly altering the series of events there, but he did fart on air in an interview with Eric Swalwell. Well, it's controversy over who farted really in that one. Maybe they both did, but anyway, eventually he got fired. He was back on the network, and he had some thoughts about tariffs, and this was before Trump instated the pause. But he said something. Well, it's just an easy dunk. It gives everyone a chance for a really easy, cheap dunk. And you know there's nothing I like more than an easy, cheap dunk. The easier and cheaper, the better. I'm not above any of it. So here is Chris Matthews.
But there's another thing. I watched on the evening news last night, one of the other networks, and I watched the issue of lumber. Now, you see, we get so much of our lumber, our 2x4s, from Canada. Where we get it from? Canada. We get our newsprint from up there for newspapers. The fact is we get it. What are we going to do? Have more lumber made in the United States now? What is our plan now? Oh, we're not going to import wood, so we're going to make more wood? We're going to create more wood? Is that it? I don't think we're in a position to simply replicate the imports coming into this country with our own products. It can't always be done. And I think if a wood's example of that, wood. Are we going to make more wood in this country because of our trade deal? I don't think so.
What are we going to do? We're just going to make more wood? It's ridiculous. You know, we also import some bottled water from Canada, maybe. I don't know. Let's just say that we do. What are we going to do? Just get more water? What? Are we going to find our own water? What do you think? Water falls from the sky? Is that what you think? Oh, yeah, sure. Let's just wait for the magical water sky fairy to drop water from the sky. Great plan, guys. That's what Chris Matthews is saying, basically. You expect us to create more wood? Wood doesn't grow on trees, for God's sake. As my dad used to say. Good point, Chris. Good point. Except that wood, you know, is trees. So that's where we get it. Where do you think we get wood, Chris? Where do you think lumber is? Where do you think it comes from? Where do we get wood? And yes, in fact, we can create more wood. We just, you know, we have trees. We can grow trees. So you actually can. You can just create. You can just like make it. It's magic. And in fact, we have a lot of trees already. We have 228 billion trees in this country. I asked ChatGPT, and that's what it told me. It also told me that there are 716 trees per person. So that's good information to have. So we've got plenty of wood, and I think that, look, there are examples you could point to of things that we import that we could not just easily create on our own. It's just that Chris Matthews chose the worst example. He chose the worst possible example to illustrate that point, which is great. There's been some discussion about Kristi Noem, who's been doing all these videos and photo ops while she's out with the ICE agents on immigration raids, always wearing the uniform, the body armor, the hair and makeup all done up. latest video has caused some controversy. Let's watch it.
Here we are with Marco and Brian today. They're letting me roll with them. We're going to go out and pick up somebody who I think is got charges of human trafficking. We earlier had an op that swept up somebody who was wanted for murder. So appreciate the good work that they do every day, and we appreciate them working to make America safe.
So you see again the body armor, the gun, the hat, kind of motioning slightly towards the agent. With she motions towards the agent with the barrel of the weapon that seems to point in his direction, which is not what you want. The firearm should not be used like a laser pointer. That's not what you want to do. And I have the same take on this that a lot of people do. I don't need the Kristi Noem dress up thing. I just don't need it. We don't need it. Nobody needs it. Let the ICE agents go do what they do. Let the big tough dudes go out and catch the bad guys and the gang members and deport them. And by the way, by all accounts, Kristi Noem is doing a really good job in her actual role. She's performing she's fulfilling her obligations. She's doing a good job. It's just that it's the pageantry part of it that we don't need. This kind of thing really only appeals to very specific a specific demographic. I think that when you've got Kristi Noem, she's got the makeup on, she's got the hair, and she's got the body armor, which looks like it doesn't even really fit. And she's carrying the weapon and she's sort of pretending that she's going to be knocking down doors with these guys. She's what, 5'6", 110 pounds. I mean, it's not going to happen. I think that this is basically for boomer conservative men only. I think boomer men like the whole kick-ass boss babe routine. They like the conservative woman holding the gun, pretending to be Tomb Raider or whatever. Not all boomer men, but I do think this is a boomer man play. It's not for women. Conservative women don't need this. Younger guys in my generation, if I can call myself younger at this point, we find this pretty cringe. So you're really left with like the kind of Sean Hannity viewer demographic. And I don't mean that as an insult, okay? No shade. This is not shade. I'm just offering my analysis. I think that's who, when you see this and you say, well, who's this for? Why are you doing this? Who is this for? I think that's who it's for. But whoever it's for, it's not necessary. We don't need the cosplay. We just need seriousness. And I think the Trump administration is taking the deportation of criminal illegal aliens very seriously by all accounts. Like this is and guys like Tom Homan, very serious guy. I mean, nobody would deny that. So they are taking it very seriously. They are doing it well. But then you just have this, you kind of mix in this, a little bit of this theater here, which is made to post on Twitter, and it's supposed to be impressive. And I just, let's leave all that behind. We don't need it. We don't need it. That's my take on that. Tax season is officially here, and the IRS is turning up the heat with the April 15th deadline fast approaching. Now's the time to act. If you've fallen behind on filing or owe back taxes, delay will only make things worse. Every day you wait increases your risk and the consequences. With over 5,000 new tax liens filed every day and powerful enforcement tools like property seizures, bank levies, and wage garnishments at its disposal, the IRS is applying pressure at a level we haven't seen in years. Don't make the mistake of facing the IRS alone. Tax Network USA is here to help you take control. Whether your tax issue is $10,000 or $10 million, their team of skilled attorneys and seasoned negotiators has resolved over $1 billion in tax debt using proven strategies. Your consultation is absolutely free. Don't wait for another letter or a surprise levy. Put a stop to the growing interest, penalties, and threats, and take back control of your finances. Call 1-800-958-1000 or visit tnusa.com/Walsh. Tax season is here. Don't wait for April 15th to make a move. Beat the IRS to it. The stock market is surging. Global tariffs are shifting major headlines with major consequences, but legacy media won't tell you what's really happening. That's the reason we exist. At Daily Wire Plus, we lead with the facts, then deliver the truth from the most trusted voices in conservative media. People who say what you can't, who fight where you can't, and who never back down. Members get this show ad-free and unfiltered with live chat, investigative journalism that takes you behind the story, and premium entertainment that actually reflects your values. Now's the time to become a member. Go to dailywire.com/subscribe. Now let's get to our daily cancellation. You know, a lot of people have been mad at me this week. Well, a lot of people are mad at me every week, but this is an especially mad week. It's the kind of week where somebody tweeted, quote, "I'm praying that Matt Walsh gets into a fatal car accident." And that tweet got like 150 likes before it was taken down. And I know what you're thinking. Only 150 likes? That's disappointing. We got to get those numbers up. And I agree. But again, the tweet was taken down. That's not a bad tally for something that was only posted for a few hours. So get off my case about it. There was also another tweet that said simply, "I can't wait for Matt Walsh to die." And I appreciate that this guy is more open-minded. You know, the other one only wants me to die in a car accident, but this guy is open to really anything causing my death. Shark attack, asteroid strike, spontaneous combustion. He'll take anything, and I really do appreciate that. But in any case, people are especially upset at me this week, as best I can tell, because I have been speaking out about the murder of Austin Metcalf. And my take on the murder is that, first of all, it's bad, which is already very controversial among a large number of leftists. And also, second, I believe that his killing at the hands of Carmelo Anthony is part of a larger trend. And the larger trend is that young black males like Carmelo Anthony are, well, constantly killing people and committing other acts of violence. Young black males are the most violent demographic in the country, hands down, no contest. I think we should probably acknowledge that fact and start taking it seriously. And this in particular is what seems to have angered so many people, to the point that some of them are wishing for my death. Although, in fairness, most of them were wishing for my death before all of this, so really it's just icing on the cake. So today I want to go through and watch some of the angry videos that have been posted responding to my comments on the Metcalf murder, and we'll hear my critics out, find out if maybe they have any legitimate points to make. Let's start with this video from a channel called Political Punk. He's very offended. Let's find out why.
Look at this tweet, man. If I told you that a young man stabbed another young man to death for telling him he was in the wrong seat, and then I told you that one young man in this altercation was white and the other black, and then I asked you to guess the race of the assailant, every single person would know the answer immediately, Matt Walsh says. Young black males are violent to a wildly, outrageously disproportionate degree. That's just a fact, he says. We all know it. And it's time we speak honestly about it, or nothing will ever change. Dude, this is like Jim Crow right here, bro. And yet, like every mass shooter is a white guy, right? But dude, this is straight up Klan. I mean, it's coming from Matt Walsh, who is basically straight up Klan, but every mass shooter, every one of them is white.
Okay, now the claim that every mass shooter is white is one that will come up again in these clips, so we'll save that for later. It's not remotely true at all, spoiler alert, but we'll get to that in a few minutes. He says that my point about the disproportionate violence of black males is straight up Klan stuff, but you'll notice what he doesn't say that I'm wrong. And this is another theme that will emerge when you point out the disproportionate violence of black males. Leftists will get offended. They'll call you names. They'll say you're racist. They'll deflect. They'll talk about white school shooters and mass shooters and so on. But what they won't do, because they can't do it, is present any data that contradicts the claim itself. What they won't do is say, hey, let's look at the numbers. I'm going to show you that young black males are not disproportionately violent. They won't do that because it's just simply the case that black males are disproportionately violent, and they just demand that we don't notice it. And there's a lot that this next person doesn't want us to notice. This is someone calling himself intelligent hood genius, so you know it's going to be good. Let's listen.
White people, black people are violent, black men are violent. I'm confused. And what clowns like Matt Walsh want to do is just put up a narrative. This ain't got nothing to do with race. This was supposed, like I said, this is someone who was aggressive, was met with aggression. When you know how to talk, all he had to do was, yo, you don't belong here, you know, da-da-da-da, woo-woo, hey, man, you know, this is our thing, this, that, and third. You got to go, man. This is where we at. This is our tent, or whatever. This is where our stuff at. You know, you don't belong here. You know what I mean? It could have been that simple. It could have been that simple. And maybe the young man would have got up and left, but you don't know that, because if you just come out being disrespectful and coming with that aggression, man, you better get your ass away from here. You better leave. You better move. This is our tent. What you doing here? Da 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 da. Now it's not now it's, oh well, make me leave. Since you want to come like you gonna bully me or something like that. Okay, all right. Well, yeah. Well, you know what? I'm coming. I'm gonna push you out the way. I'm gonna push you, and then you come pushing and shoving. Yo, you keep touching me. Put your hands on me. Keep touching. And then he pull a knife out and stab you in the chest. Now you want to cry wolf. Like I say, in the streets, that's justified. But in the court of law, it's not going to be self-defense. And the young man made a mistake. He made a mistake. You know what I mean? And he only stabbed him one time, so he obviously wasn't really trying to. And you know, he made a mistake, and it was uncalled for, and he shouldn't have had that knife with him.
Uncalled for. Understating it slightly. Now, you say he made a mistake by stabbing Austin. No, sir, a mistake is opening your car door too wide and scratching the car next to you in the parking lot. A mistake is turning a corner in a hallway and bumping into somebody. Stabbing a guy directly in the heart is not a mistake. It's a deliberate and premeditated act of homicide. The fact that he only stabbed him once in the heart is irrelevant. I mean, that's like saying, well, he only cut his head off once, right? It only takes once. Second, you say that stabbing a guy for disrespecting you is justified in the streets. Yes, exactly. That's exactly what I'm talking about. That is precisely the problem. The fact that stabbing a guy and killing him is considered justified in the streets is the entire point that I'm trying to make. Because when you say in the streets, what you really mean is in black culture. Now, because I know you don't mean necessarily in the literal physical streets, although maybe there too. And you're definitely not talking about in the streets of a white upper middle class neighborhood. No, you're talking about in a black neighborhood, in the streets of a black neighborhood. In a black neighborhood, according to you, it is justified to kill a man for perceived disrespect. Yes, and that's the problem. That's the problem with the streets, isn't it? Next, we have a guy named Alfonso, who I guess, from what I could tell, fashions himself some kind of conservative, but he's very upset with me also and says that I am, in fact, a liability, whatever that means. But let's listen.
Matt Walsh is a liability in terms of the so-called race narrative. Okay, long story short, as far as Matt Walsh is concerned, black folks just have this innate problem of being violent. Okay, that's how Matt Walsh wants you to perceive us. Now, Matt wants to. I guess he's the authority on what it is to be black and how we're supposed to behave, and I'm pretty sure the bell curve satisfies him and stuff like that. But what Matt Walsh fails to point out to y'all is who has control of the black community. Well, that would be the Democrat Party. All right. Black folks ain't this way just because it's just something in our genes. I mean, heck, man, if you want, it's funny how you want to make it out to be that this is a problem with black folks. The world over, you know who they're afraid of the most? White people. They're afraid of white people the most. I'm not saying that it's justified. But heck, man, when you consider the Nazis, when you consider the Vikings, when you consider the KKK that we had here, the stigma that's on white people, that's something that they did to themselves.
Well, Alfonso, if you're still worried about a ship full of Vikings showing up and ransacking your village, that's really a you problem. And I'd say the same if you're worried about the Nazis or the KKK. Hey, Alfonso, do you have any examples of the white menace from this century? You gave me one from about 10 centuries ago, and then two others that haven't been relevant since before the middle of the last century. And by the way, if we're blaming white people for the Nazis, we also have to give white people credit for beating the Nazis. So it's basically a wash in that case. Historically speaking, it's just not remotely true that white people have been the most violent or uniquely violent. That is a fantasy that you keep alive in your head, Alfonso, because you've never read a history book in your life. Non-white regions of the world have been very, very violent since the beginning of recorded history and long before that. And by the way, do you know who first abolished slavery? Do you know who, in fact, abolished slavery over the objections of Africans and Arabs? That would be white Europeans. Now, as for the violence in the black community being the fault of Democrats, I certainly agree that Democrat policies have made everything worse. You will not hear any objections from me on that point, but I noticed that in your analysis of who is to blame for violence in the black community, the one group you seem to have let off the hook is the black community. But we got you talking about Democrats and Vikings, and you're going all the way back 1,000 years to look for... What about the actual people in these communities? Is it crazy to suggest that perhaps black people are also responsible for violence committed by black people? Or is there any connection here at all that you might notice? You just said that, you know, the alleged reputation that white people have for violence is one that we did to ourselves, quote unquote, because of the Vikings 1,000 years ago. So let me get this straight. White people are responsible for our supposed reputation for violence, but black people aren't responsible for theirs. I'm more responsible for the raping and pillaging done by Viking warriors in the year 950 AD than the black community is for the raping and pillaging done by black criminals in the current year we're actually living in. Does that make sense to you, Alfonso? If Democrat leaders in predominantly black cities are bad, and they are, who elected them? Who are the voters electing these incompetent people to lead them? If a politician in a predominantly black city runs on a platform of law and order, he will lose. Why is that? Who are the voters who automatically reject any political leader who promises to actually arrest criminals and punish them? And if fatherless homes are a major driver of crime in the black community, and they are, who are the fathers abandoning their families? Who are the mothers going around and sleeping with men that they aren't married to? These are self-inflicted problems. And if you aren't ready to admit that, then you aren't ready to have this conversation at all. And there are many more videos just like the one we already played, but we don't have time to go through all of them. We'll move over to TikTok and look at one or two more. Here's a video from an account that, and I just like this one because the account is called Empathy Wins. But it apparently did not win in this video. Watch.
Matt Walsh and all of America know that most school shooters are young white men. Matt Walsh and all of America know that most serial killers in the United States are white men. So much so that our own writers of horror fiction are always casting the slasher in a slasher film as a white man to match the statistics.
I'm sorry. Let me see if I have this right. You think that when Hollywood is making slasher horror films, that they are studiously making sure that the proportion of white killers in those movies matches real-life crime statistics? That's how you think this works? You think Friday the 13th is a documentary? Well, just to clear things up, no, that's not how it works. Hollywood always casts white men as the killers because if they cast black villains, then people like you will throw a hissy fit. If there was a slasher horror film where you've got a black killer killing white people, people like you would lose your minds. Unless at the end of it, it turns out that the black killer was justified because all the people that he was killing were racist. And that's the only time that it would be okay. In reality, according to the Radford University FGCU serial killer database, between the years of 1900 and 2010, 52% of serial killers were white and 40% were black. That means that black people are hugely overrepresented among serial killers and whites are underrepresented, which means that there are more black serial killers per capita than white, actually. In fact, two of the deadliest serial killers this century were the Beltway snipers, which I remember that well because I lived in that general area when this was happening, shot and killed 17 people in 2002. They were both black. So your facts are just wrong. There's not much else to say. Let's play one more. So that now we can finally deal with, and because this has come up in almost every video now, is the mass shooters are white. So we'll finally deal with that claim. Watch.
Matt Walsh is a bloated, rotten corpse, but he is a perfect reflection of everything wrong with American conservatives and American racists. Because white people shoot up schools at a larger percentage than anyone else. But if I go around assuming that white culture leads to school shootings, that would be an insane statement to make. But it's not insane that when one boy, teenage boy, stabs another teenage boy to defunct an entire culture of people, that's not insane. White people are the only ones allowed to be individuals who have their own problems and who can be blamed individually for issues. Because the moment a black person does anything wrong, now the whole black race has to jump in.
All right. Of course, white people are never blamed for anything as a group. That never happens. When's the last time you heard anyone blame white people as a group? It's not like blaming white people as a group is the favorite pastime of people like the one in that video there. Okay, as for mass shootings, according to a Washington Post database, 38% of mass shooters, 38% are white, which means, again, that white people are vastly underrepresented among mass shooters. 29% are black, which means black people are, again, greatly overrepresented. There are more black mass shooters per capita than there are white. And get this, if you narrow it down to school shootings in particular, meaning shootings that happen at a school, right? That's a school shooting at a school, regardless of the casualty count, shooting at a school. Well, you'll find that according to a 2023 study titled Characteristics and Obtainment Methods of Firearms Used in Adolescent School Shootings, 58% of school shooters were black. Only 28% were white. Again, there are many more black school shooters per capita than white. In fact, not even per capita with school shooters. There are more black school shooters, period, than white. So, those are the facts. And going back to the other video about Hollywood and movies, the fact that everyone assumes that all mass shooters and all school shooters are white, that it's a uniquely white thing, or that white people are more likely to be mass shooters or school shooters, people assume that entirely because of Hollywood movies portraying it that way, and because the news media will just ignore mass shootings and even school shootings that are perpetrated by non-white people for the most part. So, am I accusing black culture of cultivating violence because of one stabbing? No, I'm accusing it of cultivating violence because literally every category of violence, no matter how you break it down, is led by the black community. I'm accusing it of cultivating violence because black people are only 13% of the population, but more than half of all murderers. If only 13% of murder suspects were black, we wouldn't be having this conversation. If it was even 15% or 20%, it probably wouldn't be enough of a disparity to be worth pointing out. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about half, 50%, half from 13% of the population. That is a staggering number. That's historic. It's mind-boggling. It's baffling. It's unprecedented. Now, I wish that the numbers were not like this. Despite how I am portrayed by people like the ones in these videos, I don't want this to be the case. I wish we didn't have to talk about this. I wish it wasn't as bad as this. I wish it wasn't the case that every majority black community in the country is plagued by violent crime. I wish it wasn't the case that as a neighborhood or shopping mall or movie theater or anything attracts more black people, it also in every case, every time becomes less safe and more crime-ridden. I wish that wasn't true, but it just is true. And you can have the courage to face it, or you can cover your eyes and plug your ears and shout the word racist at anyone who tries to talk about it. The choice is yours. But if you choose the latter, you are choosing more death and more destruction and more misery. That's your choice. At least have the guts to be honest about it. And that's why all the people screaming at me for being honest about these issues are today canceled. That'll do it for the show today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Have a great day. Talk to you tomorrow. Godspeed.
John Bickley here, Daily Wire Editor-in-Chief. Wake up every morning with our show, Morning Wire, where we bring you all the news that you need to know in 15 minutes or less. Join me and my co-host Georgia Howe for daily coverage of all the biggest stories on Morning Wire.